Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming and for being here. So this is Miriam's House webinar, and we're really excited to hear all the speakers. We have Ariella speaking today, Gail Wanunu, and Ariella Azaraf. So we're very excited to hear all their insights and experiences about the topic. So without further ado, our first speaker is going to be Ariella Leibowitz, who's been working at Miriam's House for years. So yeah, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining. Special thank you to Gabi Amrami, Chana Beitner, Emily Karendian, and Daniela Sugar for putting this together. This webinar will hopefully allow many to benefit from it. So we really appreciate all your hard work. Thank you also to our guest speaker, Ariella Azaraf, who will be providing tools and tips to assist in guiding young women become healthy and stable adults. Ariella, as a side, Ariella did work as a program social worker for Camp Extreme back in 2014, so it is great to have her back, and we're so great to see her and to have her here. To give you a little bit of an intro, Project Extreme began 20 years ago as an intervention program for teens aged 13 through 18. We first started with Camp Extreme, a therapeutic summer program for boys. And over time, we expanded to include a girls division, along with Shabbatons, Yom Tovim programs, a crisis text line, and much more. Project Extreme always strives to fill the needs of the community, and we began to see that there was a need to extend the program once again in order to provide support to young adults over 18, for those that were out of crisis, but still needed a safe place where they could grow and they could mature and get the skills that they needed. 7 years ago, Project Extreme opened Miriam's House, a transitional living shelter for young women, offering a safe and growth-oriented home. Over the years, we've seen tremendous success, and we've since opened it up, not only to our Project Extreme alumni, but to the general public as well. I really, again, appreciate this opportunity to tell you about Miriam's House. If you'd like more information, please contact us. The information can be found on the Project Extreme website, projectextreme.org, and please do not hesitate to reach us if you have any questions or would like to discuss anything further. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ayala, for explaining us about Miriam's House. So I've been working with Miriam's House for 6 weeks, and I really think that they're doing amazing things. So thank you for sharing with us. Our next speaker is Gail Wanunu. So yeah.
Hi, everybody. I don't know if you can hear me or not well, because I'm on not the greatest internet connection. So basically, I moved into Miriam's house a year and a half ago. I was in a really bad place. I was in such a bad place, I actually did not want to come to Miriam's house. Even though I really didn't want to come, AY and the director at the time, Shifra Rabinowitz, was really, really sweet enough to still give me a place to stay, knowing I really didn't want to be there. And I would say for the first month or two, I really fought them. Like, I was not happy. I was in a really, really bad place. I was going to treatment during the day, and through it all, Shifra, the director, was there for me 100%. She let me talk to her whenever I needed her. She let me lean on her whenever I needed her. She gave me the push I need whenever I needed a push. She knew when to back off when I needed someone to back off from me. And all in all, eventually I started opening up, and I started seeing what a great opportunity I was given. I always traveled a lot. I always struggled a lot with traveling. That was why I went to Miriam's house, that I have a panic disorder around traveling. When I first moved into Miriam's house, in order to get to the city, I was having panic attacks every single day. I had hired a woman to go with me to the city. That's how bad it was. And I would come home and I'd be so exhausted, I would take a nap. Now, a year and a half later, I am very excited to say I've been on a plane multiple times. I went to camp this past summer. Just got back from Dallas. I am planning another trip to Atlanta. And in fact, I am now looking for an apartment on my own to move out from Miriam's house, because thank God that is where I am today. If someone would have told me a year and a half ago that I would be living on my own in an apartment, getting on an airplane, and traveling, I would have cried, because I feel like you're dangling my dreams in my face. And Miriam's house let me have my dreams, with the support, not of just the staff, but of the girls around me. I couldn't have done it without, they're like my sisters. They're not even just my friends, they're my sisters. You live with these people day in, day out. You see them at their best, them at their worst, and you just bond. And it really is an amazing place. Without Miriam's house, I don't know where I'd be. I definitely would not be in this amazing place that I am today. So thank you for letting me share my story.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, Gail. It was really touching and really like, wow, thank you. And so our next speaker is Ariella Azaraf, and she's gonna expand on the whole idea of like from being a teenager to being an adult and that whole stage of life. So
thank you. Okay, great. So I'm just going to it takes me a second with sharing screen. I should be good at it by now, right? Okay, great. 1 second. Okay. Okay, first of all, Gail, Gail, right? Is that your name? Gail?
Yes. Gail. Yes.
So nicely. I kind of like just hearing you speak, I just got the chills of just really understanding what it's like to be. I think firsthand, I'm no longer an emerging adult, so I think it's so nice to hear from somebody who is currently in that stage of life and how important Miriam's house is. As Ariella said, I had the incredible opportunity to work at Camp Extreme a while ago. I think like I see Simcha's on here. He could remind me, I think like 6 years ago. I'm a social worker at the Jewish Board, and a friend of mine, Racheli Teichman, who had been doing it for years, kept encouraging me to do it. And it was such an incredible summer to just spend time with just very, very special young women who are all in this stage of life of not quite a kid, but also trying to navigate this adult life and not really so sure. And I think it's so important. And when Hannah and her friends called me and asked me to speak, I was so excited because this is actually the stage of life that I feel the most passionate about. I feel that it's important on two angles. On one hand, it's important for the emerging adult to feel understood. And I see on here there are some moms. I think it's also important for the parents to understand what it's like for their child, right? And also tips for them of how to navigate that. And so a lot of times in my private practice, I a lot of times work with this age, and I feel so strongly that both people need to understand how to navigate each other, right? How the parents need to understand their child, and they want to understand, and how the emerging adult needs to understand themselves and also their role within the family context. So I'm so happy that there are parents on here and young adults on here, and I hope that this is helpful for all of you. So I am a clinical social worker. I work in New York. I have a private practice in Midtown where I specialize in depression and anxiety with this age, with kind of post-college, college age, trying to navigate all the different parts of this part of life that we'll talk about. And I also work at Manhattan Day School, a private Orthodox school on the West Side, with middle school children. So my main focus is anxiety and depression, and really self-acceptance of understanding what it is that you're going through and how to really totally embrace all of the parts of what you're trying to navigate. So let's get started. So, hold on 1 second. Okay, I'm gonna get this right. It's like we've been like 9 months into Zoom life. I should know how to work it by now, right? Okay, so the emerging adult life, the stage of life was formed by a psychologist, Jeffrey Arnett, in 2004, that he kind of termed this understanding of an emerging adult. So it's kind of like the age of in between. So all the young adults on here, can I kind of get a thumbs up if you feel like you're in this in between place? Right? It's this in-between place of I'm not really a kid, but I'm trying to navigate adult life, and I don't really know where I stand, which naturally brings up a lot of anxiety. I think even not as an emerging adult, we all have a lot of anxiety in COVID and 2020 and just all the different parts going on in the world right now. But I think especially when you're in this stage of life, typically age 18 to 29, really late teens through 20s, when you're really trying to navigate who you are and where you stand with certain things can naturally bring up a lot of anxiety for people. So the 5 features really of an emerging adult, which Arnett really came up with, was the age of identity explorations, right? You're in this stage of life of really trying to explore your identity. Who am I? What am I doing, right? It's also an age of instability, that we don't always have that stability. You've left the framework of high school, and then for some of you, high school and then seminary. It's like in the high school I went to, the rabbi used to say it's like the 5th year of high school. It's like obvious that you're going to seminary, right? So you have this framework that's built in, and then you have your college years. And then after college, it's kind of like, where do I go from here? I don't have anything built in. Do I want to go to graduate school? What do I want to go to school for? So it's kind of this age of instability of trying to figure it out. It's a very self-focused age, which we'll talk about, right? It's a lot of focused time on me. What do I need? What's best for me? It's the age of feeling in between. And also it's an age of possibilities, right? It's just this age of trying to explore myself, and everything is open to you. You're not tied down to a family. You're not tied down oftentimes to a career or a marriage, that you're in this place of the world is your oyster. You could do whatever you want. And as exciting as that sounds, right? It also naturally brings up some anxiety. So I think that I kind of put my notes on here, but I think it's most important to acknowledge that, as I said before, it's a challenging time for parents and for the emerging adult, right? That everybody is just trying to figure out each other's boundaries and try to understand each other in this. So it is a time that we're trying to form our own identity, right? So you're in this space of trying to take parts of what you've learned from your childhood, right? And form your own opinion about it. So all of us have experienced, right, our childhood, lessons that we've learned from home, and sometimes lessons that we've learned of how we don't want to do things, right? Lessons that we've learned of, okay, this makes a lot of sense for me. This is what I want to take away. And sometimes lessons of, thank you to my family for teaching me how I want to do things differently. But in different ways, functional and dysfunctional, we're kind of emerging from our childhood home and trying to figure out what works for me and what doesn't. That we're in this exploring age of trying to decide who I am. What do I want to do professionally, right? Where do I want to go to school? You know, dating is a very big part of it also. Who do I want to date? What are my core values, right? What is it that I need right now for me? And I think it's also a stage that often emerging adults feel very misunderstood. Because on one hand, you feel like I should have it figured out, right? I finished college, I should just know what my next stage is. But on the other hand, you don't know where you're going and you don't know what you're doing. And in some ways, you're still a kid in the sense that you seek support, you seek your parents for some guidance. But on the other hand, you crave that independence and kind of autonomy to make your own decisions. So it is a very self-focused time, right? It's very centered on self, that you're free from any type of restrictions and there's no framework set up for you. So the world, that you could do whatever you want. But I think a really big part that people often struggle with is that you take responsibility for yourself, but you don't really feel like an adult, right? Does this resonate with any of you? I know I can't see you all, but you're kind of in this in-between place. And I have a lot of clients oftentimes that say they feel like an imposter. Does anyone ever feel that way, right? That you're sitting at work and you feel like you're being taken seriously, right? You were hired. But on the other hand, you're feeling like, what do I know? Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I feel like an imposter, right? Which, by the way, many people feel often. But it's this place of life is that you're in this in-between place of feeling like I want to be taken seriously and I want to take myself seriously, but I'm struggling with it. So the imposter syndrome is something that comes up a lot of times for people, trying to take themselves seriously and trying to feel good about what they're doing. But there's just so many other parts and other voices that we're going to talk about that sometimes hold us back. So something kind of to be neuroscience, I don't know if anyone here is into the psychology of the brain, but the prefrontal cortex is the part of our brain where we hold the rational way of thinking, right? That the amygdala is the place where we hold all the emotions in the back, right, of our brains. And the prefrontal cortex is where we hold the rational thinking. And that part of our brain actually isn't fully developed until age 25, right? That it really starts to form around 18. That's why you can vote when you're 18. Interesting. And it's really fully formed at 25, which is actually when you can rent a car. So it makes sense why there are these certain landmarks of ages. I didn't know that. I thought that was interesting. So I think a really important piece here to understand our brain a little bit is that sometimes we respond to situations from an emotional place, right? I just spoke at high school night at the school I work at. And we were talking about that sometimes someone can feel so passionate about a high school they want to go to, right? But their parent may know, okay, actually, that's like really not a good high school for you. Or even seminary, right? Like when someone asks, why do you want to go there? It's like, oh, my friends are going there, I have to go there, right? Or like a vacation, like you're responding from a place of emotion. And that part of our brain isn't really fully developed where we can kind of rationalize, okay, what it would be good judgment here, right? I don't really have the complete awareness of what the consequences would be, right? A lot of times before 25, we're acting from a place of emotion. And that's where it becomes tricky, because that's really where we need the safe and responsible adults in our lives, right? So that's why this stage is really difficult and tricky, because we feel like we've got it, but we're not really fully formed in a way that we can make these decisions on our own and understand the consequences. So I think a really big part of this, all the parents out there, and for those of you on here that could bring this back to your parents, or just to understand, or the lack of parents, right? I know that there are many different people on here that whether you have a good relationship with your parents or a more difficult relationship with your parents, that parents are a huge part of the emerging adult life, right? That every conversation that we have with our parents is really an opportunity for them to model how to navigate the world, right? How to understand ourselves and how to understand the world around them. So if you're sitting on here and maybe your parents aren't present in your life, or maybe you have a more difficult relationship, think of any safe adults in your life who you turn to. So whether it's a mentor, or whether it's a family, or a Rebbitzin, whatever it is, think of the adult figures in your life. And the adult figures on here, also remember that this is an opportunity to really model for them the world around them and to understand what it is that they need. And any conversation with them really impacts all of their decision making. So if you're not a parent, this is still important to stay on here, because I think it could give you language to talk about, again, with your parent or that safe adult in your life. So I think the most important part here is that everybody just wants to be understood, right? Young adults or old adults, whatever it is. Ooh, I don't know what just happened here. We all want to feel understood, right? In all of our relationships, we want to feel heard and understood. So I think the number one part here would be to be patient, right? To really be patient with your teen, to be patient with your young adult. That sometimes we want to come from this place, parents want to explain everything or give all the answers, right? But the journey is to kind of let it unfold, right? Have you heard this saying of like learn and let live, right? That the journey of an emerging adult is to really figure it out on your own, but to be there. So part of it is that we need parents to be patient with us, that I know you want to give me all the answers, but try to resist that. I think another important piece here is to acknowledge that the stage of life that they're at, right? That the parent is figuring it out, right? And you're trying to figure it out. So part of it is to have a conversation of how can I support you during this, right? As adults, as I wrote here, it feels confusing. So to open up a conversation and say, how can I support you? I see that you've made these decisions, or I see that you've made this, judgment call. Can you help me understand it? That I think a big part of it, on my LCSW, on my Instagram, I just posted, name it, make space for it, and honor it. That so often in life when we're feeling something, we need to name it. We need to say exactly what is going on. And sometimes in a relationship, when there's tension or when there's misunderstanding, you just need to name it, right? I know right now, I just kind of had a situation in my own life of just COVID and trying to navigate and quarantining, and what does it mean? How many of us are like kind of making it up as we go, right? And I just kind of had a difficult, I see some nodding heads. I just had a difficult situation with a friend that I just said, okay, we just have to name it, that you think differently than me, and that's okay. And once you named it, it automatically relieves this tension of not understanding each other. So I think so too here, that when we name it, right, you're no longer a child, but I'm also not an adult. So you almost taking responsibility for that. Like, I know that my brain isn't fully formed where I need to make decisions, but I know in my heart and I know emotionally, right, that this is what I want to do. So stay mindful of that it's really a delicate dance between the needs that sometimes you may need, even beyond emerging adult, we need our parents or our mentors' help. And sometimes we appear to be okay, right? Have any of you felt that before? Like you want to appear like you're okay, but you don't really have it all together, right? Or you actually really do need help. or you need guidance, or you need to talk something out. So different times in our lives, we really do transition through this stage. It's kind of this stage of you're in this cocoon of your childhood, and then, you know, you turn into this beautiful butterfly. But it takes time to become a butterfly, right? You have to go through pain, you have to go through difficult situations, you have to learn hard lessons, and then only through that can the light appear. But when we acknowledge that it's a transition, and we acknowledge that it's a dance between all of our different needs, that's the most important thing to do, because then it's a mutual understanding of how can I be here for you? What do you need? So really naming that in the relationship. Another part that I think is really important is manage expectations. I had a supervisor once that had this quote, I'm very into quotes, that she had said that expectations are premeditated resentments, right? So I love that expectations are premeditated resentments, that when you have an expectation that something's going to happen, you're automatically going to resent the person, right? I remember my sister had a friend that on her birthday, she used to have a list of everyone that she thought was going to call. And like when they didn't call, she was so disappointed. And I always use that example because I don't know why I like remember it from when I was younger. And I think it's so true in our own life. Like when we have an expectation of what someone's going to do for us, right? We become resentful when that doesn't come true. We become resentful when we don't feel like they've met us where we need. They haven't done for us what we've kind of set up on our brain of what's going to happen. You know, I think in COVID, there's been a learning curve for all of us of trying to like push all expectations aside. But I think the biggest part for parents, and I think that in my clinical work, I think that my clients have really benefited from their parents understanding this, is that we understand that parents want their child to succeed, right? That you want your child to do well. But a part of it is the parent is the need to manage their expectation of their child, right? To manage what they're expecting of them. That it's almost kind of like dropping your agenda, that oftentimes as a parent, rightfully so, you have an agenda of what you would like your child to do, right? Right after college, maybe it's to go straight to graduate school, but maybe your child doesn't know where they want to go to school, right? Or maybe they don't want to go to school, or maybe they don't even want to go to college. So I think a part of what can help that emotional relationship between the parent and the emerging adult is to really drop the agenda and to stay curious. I think staying curious in most relationships is healthy, that when we come from a place of asking questions, right? Asking open-ended questions. What are your plans, or what are you thinking to do? Because when you put it into the emerging adult's hands, you're giving them space to start thinking. What are you thinking? You're not saying what you would like them to do. You're saying, what are you thinking? Help me understand what you want to do. So I think an important part here is to be super mindful of your expectations. And what are your own fears, right? As the parent, what are your own fears if your child doesn't do A, B, and C? What are your fears that are going to come up for you? Another part here, I think, is really asking yourself, what is the internal, right, my own self-talk, or what is the external pressure around me, and what is good for my child? So I think that's a really important thing of trying to stay aware of what is my own stuff, right? And I talk a lot about boundaries in my work, and I think especially, we'll get to that in a second, especially with the emerging adults, but trying to create this boundary between yourself and sometimes your community at large. What does my child need versus what does the community expect, or what do I expect? And this takes a lot of work, by the way. It takes a lot of self-work for parents also, you know, but as you all know, any relationship takes work. And to really feel understood and for it to be a healthy relationship, there needs to be work. So really staying super mindful as the parent of the pressures around you. And I think a really other important part here is keeping a judgmental free zone, right? I think we would all benefit from that in all different areas, but the number one thing here is that we want our children, we want them to believe in themselves, right? We want them to believe that they've got this. You know, Kylie, I was listening to what you said before about and thank you for sharing it so like transparent. I love that. I give you so much credit that you had this fear of subways and now you're thriving, and different mentors or different people in Miriam's house enabled you to get to that place. So that's what I was saying before, is that this transitional period is that you want to believe in you, right? You want help to believe in yourself. And in order to get there, you need healthy people around you to kind of keep you going, right? To really push you to believe in yourself that I've got this. So when your parent or when the healthy adult in your world is able to push you in the way that you need, that really sets you up for success. So a little bit on kind of the emerging adult. And this is where I have a lot of thoughts. I have a lot of passionate ideas, again, just from my experience and from what I think is helpful. And I tried to keep it concise. But I think the number one part here is to create a good support system. Is that when you take a look, and I think COVID has really given time and space for a lot of thinking time, right? A lot of downtime. It's kind of us in our rooms, and if you're quarantining or where you're at, but it's given us a lot of space to think. I actually got a call the other week from a new client, and I was asking what was going on, why she was seeking treatment, and she was just like, all this thinking time. Like, I just need to talk things out. Like, there's just all these thoughts and ideas that have come to mind that I need to talk out. And it's very real. It's really, COVID has really given us space to think about things and think about our lives. So it would be a good time for all of you emerging adults out here to think about, what is my support system? Who is around me? And who is healthy and helpful in my life? And who brings me down, right? Who does not help me believe in me? Because I think that the biggest part is when you're in this stage of trying to navigate adult life, it's complicated. Friends are complicated, roommates can be complicated, dating can be complicated. There's a lot of things that are complicated, and there are a lot of things that are beautiful, right? And I think when you're in this stage of trying to figure things out, you really want to set yourself up for success. You really want to kind of surround yourself with people that help you believe in you. So I think this question I put here in bold is to stop and think, what helps you thrive and feel good? What and who, right? What activities? You know, we talk about self-care. I gave a professional development to the teachers of the school I work at. And I said, you all think I'm going to start talking about during your lunchtime, go for a manicure, go get Starbucks, right? Take a walk with a friend. And you're all going to roll your eyes and say, we don't have time for that, right? I don't know if there are any teachers on here, but I actually was talking about something else. Yes, those things are beautiful. Book a massage, go to a spa for sure. But self-care really starts with our thoughts, because that's what's in our control, right? So self-care is taking a look at, what thoughts am I feeding myself, right? So something that I practice in my own practice is something called CBT, which is cognitive behavior therapy. So it's this idea of a triangle, that it's our thoughts are connected to how we feel, and how we feel is connected to how we behave. So it's this triangle that is all intermingled, that it all starts with our thoughts. And I believe that our thoughts come from kind of the environment that we're around, the people that we surround ourselves with. You know, think about even in COVID, your friends that are sending you positive, uplifting messages, or maybe your friends that are struggling a bit more and have a harder time being positive. So setting yourself up for success is really taking the time to look at, what helps me feel good? Who and what makes me feel the healthiest me? And the other part, I think, that is important for the emerging adult is boundaries. I actually think that the number one issue that comes up with this age is boundaries with roommates. Isn't that interesting? Even more than parents right now, because that's kind of that's the stage of life where you're at, right? That you're surrounded, whether it's 2 or 3 girls, that it's kind of like everyone in one space, and you're all trying to just understand each other. And I think that everyone kind of brings this part of them with them wherever they go. I have a specific client I'm working with who, like, cleanliness in the apartment is the biggest trigger. Does this relate to any of you, right? Like, the things that are the biggest triggers between her and the roommates are like, the dishes are always in the sink. But that person grew up in a home where dishes stayed in the sink. And the other girl grew up in a home where, like, you do your dishes right away and you put them away. But it was a part where they were butting heads. I know it sounds kind of funny, but it really does affect your mental health when you're so triggered by something. And setting a boundary sometimes is being mindful of you. But to be mindful of you, you have to take a step back and take a beat and think about, what is going on for me right now? Why am I so angry? Oh, I'm angry because the dishes are always in the sink. When the dishes are in the sink, right, then the apartment isn't clean. And try to understand what's going on for you, because we're very reactive. And I actually think in COVID, we're even more reactive because we're super vulnerable, because nothing is stable right now. And when our lives don't feel as stable, maybe your apartment or your job feels stable, or maybe you've lost your job, or maybe you can't afford your apartment. But the world right now doesn't feel stable, right? That every other day COVID's going up and cases are worse, but then it's okay. And we're all trying to understand what's going on. And I think that the reactive button is amplified when we don't feel stable and we're just a little bit more vulnerable. There's a lot of fear around us. So when we're feeling that, again, naming it, what is going on for me? Why am I feeling this way? And then really setting that boundary. So it's setting that boundary with family, with roommates, with friends, with dating and everything that goes with that, with whoever it is that you're dating, or with shadchans, or with people that want to set you up, right? Just being very boundaried and aware of yourself with all of these different relationships in your life, of staying very true to you, of what your needs are and what isn't working for you. I could talk about boundaries in its whole own part, but we'll leave it at that. Another part is identifying and managing the triggers, right? Sometimes it's our own thoughts, right? Sometimes it's just what's coming up for us, but really understanding the trigger. So that dishes example I gave, that's a very real trigger, right? I don't know if some of you are sitting here saying like, okay, that is not a trigger. Some of you are like, yes, that connects to me. But what are my triggers, right? What gets in the way? Is it that, you know, I come home and my roommate just sitting on the couch and she starts just complaining about her day, and then I've had this good day and all of a sudden I'm in a bad mood, right? So staying really aware of the things that kind of set you off. I explain triggers as like a light switch, right? That it just kind of like switches on. So being mindful of like what made it switch on. Another part here, you guys, is staying mindful of the self-imposed pressure, that we put so much pressure on ourselves. And I think especially in this emerging adult stage of life, I think I should like tally how many times I say emerging adult. In this stage of life, right, we have so much pressure on ourselves of where we need to be or what we need to have done, but to really just stay mindful of that and accept and fully embrace where you're at and understanding that you've made progress. I love how Gaili said, like, I've made so much progress to be able to go on the subway and to conquer that fear. That is making progress. So trying to stay positive and trying to stay mindful of not putting that much pressure on yourself. And another piece here is really taking yourself seriously, creating the space for you to take yourself seriously, right? So I have another client I work with that she feels like an imposter, and she's a really good job in marketing at this place. And she often sits at her desk and she's like, how do they choose me, right? Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm like 21 years old, like, I don't know what I'm doing, right? And so much of what we talk about is if they take you seriously, so then it's your own self-talk. What is my self-talk? How am I talking to myself? Am I feeding myself? Am I kind of feeding the fuel of thinking negatively? Then we'll stay, I kind of call it like the hamster wheel, right? Have you ever seen a hamster on a wheel and it goes round and around and we'll never get off because we don't even know that we're doing it. By taking a minute and thinking about, well, what is my self-talk? How do I talk to myself? And how can I take myself a little bit more seriously? If all these people believe in me, then I can create space to believe in me too, right? But it's about creating the space to understand that there is this dissonance even, right? That we have these two voices. There's one voice that, you know, do you guys ever struggle with this? That there's this voice of saying, you can't do this, right? Like, they're not going to take you. You're never going to get that job. And then there's this voice of like, you've got this, right? I'm going to do it. I'm going to be able to get this. I have all the skills. Here are my strengths. And I need to really find space to combat those two voices, because I think that that's kind of the biggest difficulty in this stage of life, is that we have these two voices sitting on our shoulders. And sometimes it's the voice of our parents, right? Oh, you shouldn't be doing this, right? This isn't what your sisters did, or this isn't what I did. If there's that imposed pressure, right, that your parents are gonna, you know, after listening to this, they're gonna work on, right? But it's kind of thinking of, well, what are the pressures around me? What are the pressures from within? And how can I just be so present in my life right now? That allowing ourselves the space to take a step back from the pressure, to take a step back from the negative thoughts and embrace, wow, listen to what I've done. This is how far I've come, I think is a really, really important piece. And I think something that we spoke about before that I want to come back to is that when we take a minute and we are aware that we don't always have it together, there's going to be this push and pull, right? There's this push of, I'm an adult, take me seriously, right? I know what I'm doing. And then there's this pull of like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. Like, I need my parents right now. And creating the space to even say to your parents, you know what? Sometimes I need you. That I feel like I have it together, but sometimes I really need you in my life. And that's okay. Because when you say that, right, it's not, doesn't mean it's holding both. It doesn't mean that you don't have it together. It just means that there are times that you need help. So what I usually use in my own practice with myself and with my clients is getting rid of the word but. It's and, right? I need your help, but I don't have it together. No, I need your help and I'm trying to get it together, right? It's creating space to hold both of those feelings, to hold space of wanting to figure it out and then holding space for not always being totally sure of what I'm doing. So I just want to be mindful of the time. I know we said like 30 minutes. So I think we're kind of at that mark. So I don't know if you guys wanted to open it up to questions and answers or if you had other agenda, but I leave it to you guys.
Yeah, so thank you so much for sharing this and speaking about the emerging adult. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself, ask questions, comments, anything, really. The floor is open to everyone.
Thank you so much, Ariella. That was wonderful. Thank you again. You just had so much information. There was a lot there, and I think it's wonderful. And I look forward to sharing it with others and really getting the information out there. So thank you for your time, Gail. That was really beautiful what you said, and I appreciate everything that you're doing to obviously to work on yourself, but to share the story and to let others know about what Miriam's House is doing. And again, thank you, Gabby, Daniela, Emily, Hannah, really for all your hard work and for putting this together in such short notice. So thank you for that. I would like to add that if anybody has questions, they can also type it into the chat screen. They don't have to unmute themselves if they're more comfortable in the chat screen.
Okay, I have a question actually. So, Ariella, you spoke about surrounding yourself with people who bring you up and like people just surround yourself with good people. So what if you realize you have a toxic friendship with someone or a toxic relationship with a parent, sibling, cousin? How do you go about it? Do you have to confront them, just distance yourself? What should we do?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you. I think sometimes the first person to ask the question like breaks the ice. So thank you for your vulnerability. I think that's a very good question. I mean, how do you pronounce her name? Emil?
Emily.
Emily.
Yeah.
Emily, I should know that. It's a good question because it's tough. It's tough, especially when it's a family member and you're connected, right? You don't choose your family, you choose your friends, right? Or they say like friends are the family you choose, right? That you can't choose your family, and that's very, very difficult. So I think the number one thing would be before reacting, again, because we're all very reactive. Before reacting, is trying to understand what part of that relationship is toxic. Right? Is it you? Is it them? Is it your dynamic? What part is toxic? So I think I know I'm trying to answer generally, but I think that it's dependent on what part is toxic, right? Is it the way that they respond to you that you don't appreciate? Is it their invasion of space, right? I think that a boundary would be important, right? I think that obviously it's always best to try and express yourself. If I feel, whatever it is that is going on, but if it's something that you feel could be worked through that maybe they don't know that they're doing, to try and assert yourself, to try and express and say, you know what, it's hard for me when. And I think a lot of times we gather the most information from the way people respond to us. You know what I mean? So if it's a friend or family member who responds in a way that isn't respectful or very defensive, then that's a boundary that then you have to take your distance and you have to kind of set that boundary again. And maybe you don't share certain things, right? We can also have friends and family that we go to for different things, right? So your friend that is like a good time and you could go out with her may not be the friend that you also go to talk about spirituality and deeper things. But being mindful of like, can that friend serve me in different ways? And if not, and if she's really unhealthy or the family member, then putting up some boundaries, taking your power back. I think that's important. Taking your power back of, I'm going to decide what I share with you. And maybe I can't share with you and maybe we can't have this relationship. But first, I think trying to have a conversation about it.
Yeah, thank you. That was very helpful.
Yeah, of course. It's hard.
I also have a question.
Yeah.
So you spoke really nicely about managing expectations and how that could lead to resentment. And I feel like it's so much easier said than done, like just manage your expectations. So what would be some tips for you to for us to help us manage our expectations?
So managing your expectations with yourself or with your parents? Expectations of yourself
with
or
others.
with others.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I think that that's a really, really good question. So I think to manage expectations, first of all, is to really have awareness of it. I think sometimes I too go into things and I expect like what something's going to be like, and it's totally not that. And then I'm so disappointed because I'm like, okay, this is not what I expected in my head. So I think like being mindful that you even have an expectation. Have you guys ever had that? Like you go to a party and you walk in, you're like, it's going to be amazing. I'm going to meet so many people. And then you walk in, it's like, there's like 2 people there. But if you went in with a different mentality of, okay, whoever I meet at this party is going to be great. And maybe when you walk in and there's only 2 people, you're like, oh, they probably have such cool, like, not even to go there, but to even get to know them. And maybe they have interesting stories, or maybe they could give you some of their light or impact you in a way that you don't even know. So I think being aware that I'm even having an expectation is key, because I don't think we always know. So being aware that, okay, I'm thinking this, I'm expecting this, and how can I kind of start small? How can I like loop back? Because I do think it's connected to negative thinking. I think that, you know, when we feel like entitled, like when we feel, I think even spiritually sometimes it's like, okay, you don't want to feel entitled to anything. Whatever Hashem gives you is a blessing, right? So I think that when you go from this place of I'm not entitled and whatever comes my way is a gift, I think that also is important with relationships, of really kind of being aware that you have this expectation and pulling back a little bit and saying, okay, I'm not going to go in with any expectations, even like a mantra, and just kind of being okay and happy with whatever kind of comes your way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that was really helpful. Thank you.
Of course. I'm just going to stop my share in screen because I see their chat. Okay. Somebody wrote in the chat a very good question. What do I do when parents compare you to your children, to your siblings? So what do you do when parents compare you to your siblings? So that is so difficult. That is so difficult. I think a number one thing is, well, first of all, I think there's 2 parts to it. I know growing up, my older sister was like very bright. She still is. And she would always get really good scores on her report card or her test, whatever it is. And we're very close in age. And then I would come home and be like, Mom, like, look what I got. And my parents were always like, never put pressure on me in terms of academic, but I would self-impose and be like, oh, but blah, 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 got this. And like, and they wouldn't care, but it was my own stuff, right, that I would compare. So I think first of all, it's important to know, am I comparing or are my parents comparing? So if your parents compare you to your siblings, it sounds like a conversation would be really important. It's hard for me when. I think that when we start from a place of me, people are less reactive because we're saying what part is hard, right? Because I think our instinct is to be like, why do you always do that? Like, why do you compare me to her, right? But when you understand, when you're able to talk to them from a place of, it's hard for me when, people are much more receptive and can hear better. So I think it would be important for you to say to your parents, it's really hard for me when you compare me to X, Y, and Z. Why it's very hard for me when you do that. I have different strengths than them. I have different flaws or different weaknesses, and it's hard for me when. I know that was anonymous, but I hope that was helpful. I think it's a hard thing also when you grow up in a family where kids are close in age, and I know that happens a lot in the frum world of you know, just a lot of people kind of close in age to each other, and it's very hard, but it's important for you to make your parents aware of it, right? And that's also good because you're self-asserting your needs and what doesn't work for you, which is creating a boundary. I see here somebody else asked, how not to feel shame with the overemphasis on self-focus. Ooh, I feel that question strong. So I think the nature of this question sounds like the person that asked it could possibly be more analytical. I don't know if there's other people on here that could become analytical, but I totally can. So I understand it, that when we kind of get into this cycle of having self-awareness, right? I know self-awareness is kind of this like trendy word being thrown around. I'm so self-aware. COVID has like enabled me this space to be more self-aware. And I think that we have to be so careful with that, because exactly what this person is saying, how do I not feel shame, right? So I could be self-aware, right? And self-focused, exactly, as the emerging adult, that's one of the 5 features. I could be self-focused, but then I have to be so careful of that line to not then go into shame. So I think the answer to this is, and again, these are, you can ask another therapist and they may say something else, but this is my own opinion. I think that drawing the line of self-awareness and self-focus and being so aware is really about your thoughts, right? So CBT is taking a really good look at what thoughts am I feeding myself. I know I have one client who she's very into meditation and self-awareness and journaling, and we actually have a timer. So she puts on her timer for like 5 minutes and she journals and she takes that time to reflect and think. And when that timer goes off, she has to do something else. She has to put on, I don't know, The Crown, The Queen's Gambit, anything. She has to put on a show. She has to put on music. She has to literally change what she's doing to change the behavior so you don't stay in that kind of hamster wheel of thoughts that really lead to shame. So I think the answer to that would be to keep it really time limited of trying to focus on yourself and trying to be aware of what you need. But also when you start to feel shame, to take a hard pause and think, what am I starting to feed myself? Is this helpful, right? Or is this chaos, right? Do I want to choose, a lot of times I talk about, do I want to choose health or do I want to choose chaos? Do I want to choose crazy or do I want to choose healthy, right? We have that decision. We can go either way. So I think that being mindful of the thoughts is very, very important. When we start to feel shame, to put a hard stop and say, okay, I need to physically change what I'm doing right now. I've had enough self-focus time and I'm going to transition.
Anyone else have any questions? Okay, so I think if that's it, we're gonna end it here. I want to thank again Ariella Azaraf for speaking and sharing this amazing presentation. Ariella Leibowitz for talking about Miriam's house and everything that you do. And of course, Galwa Nunu for sharing her story. Everything was very meaningful, and I know everyone here learned a lot tonight. So I also want to thank everyone who came for coming and listening and asking questions. So if anyone has more questions, that you can reach out on Instagram, reach out on email, Miriam's house. You can even stay after this Zoom if you have any personal questions. But yeah, Ariella, you want to say something?
Yes, I really wanted to thank all of you for being here. I know some of you are private and your videos aren't on, but I just think it's so cool at 7:45 on like a Wednesday night that you're tuning in to learn about yourselves and to learn about just to gain knowledge and language of yourself and how to just live like your best life, right? And a healthy life. So really kudos to all of you on here. And Project Extreme Miriam's house is amazing. It was literally the best summer of my life, driving those trucks in the middle of Minnesota. AY, do you remember that? Oh my gosh, I didn't know where I was going. He's like, okay, here, go in the truck. And I was just like driving with like 12 girls. It was the best time. So you guys are all great that you're out here. And thank you to the Stern girls that put this together. They called me, they're like, in 2 days. I'm like, yes, let's do it. So this was so, so nice. I'm gonna put my info here. If anyone wants to private message me, if they didn't want to ask in this forum, that I'm here for you.
Great,
Okay.
thank you guys. Thanks again. Have a wonderful Hanukkah.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we'll do this again soon.